marketers are kind of doing the same work they were doing a year or two ago, and they haven't really changed their workflows, they're not using AI enough. Like I'm probably spending 25 to 30% of my time each week in even just ChatGPT.
Wow. If you were to prepare a growth hacker for a company, imagine you can like train someone from zero to growth hacker. What are the abilities you think this person should have? Would you train them on? Like, I really wanted to understand what you think constitutes of a growth hacker. You talk about curiosity, but what else?
I think a lot of times when people think about marketing and creativity, they think about kind of, clever branding and maybe something that's memorable or cute or whatever it might be. Yeah. But I think the real creativity here that is needed is the ability to solve problems, diagnose, understand problems, dig deeper to deeply understand the problems, and then come up with really good solutions that solve those problems. And I think that's the big skill set.
Here's at Fernando Miranda 7777, and my expectation for this episode is to learn if personal brands are the next leverage of growth.
777.
777.
I am at O Guilherme Lippert, and my expectation here is to understand what is going to be the future of growth, considering the AI advantages that we have right now.
Awesome. And I am at Sean Ellis on Instagram, and my expectation is just to geek out on growth and hopefully get some great questions that get my brain spinning around things maybe I haven't thought that much about.
Nice.
ROI Hunters.
So, Sean, thank you very much for coming again here in the ROI Hunters podcast. And I have one question for you. The first question is going to be the following. It's been 861 days since we launched the first episode with you. And during that time, what was your biggest ROI story or project that you have been involved between these almost 2.5 years?
Yeah, it was probably the work that I did with Bounce, luggage storage network, funded by Andreessen Horowitz, but it's just a really cool marketplace business where they have 10,000 plus partners around the world. And you can check your bags into different places for about $5 per day. So what's that? 25 race. And it's a really fast growing, profitable business. And so you're just kind of learning the importance of growing the network and how ad spend ties with growing that network, and your ROI goes up the more dense the network is. And it was just a fun project. It actually turned out the team is based in Portugal. So I got a lot of exposure to Portuguese. Seems to be a little different type of Portuguese.
It's a very different type of, we have very strange words in Portugal that in Brazil means like another thing very, very differently here. Yeah. But what type of strategy do you implemented then there with them that make this kind of ROI?
So a lot of it was conversion and retention work. So they were already pretty good on the ad spend side. They understood the connection between network growth and ad spend ROI, and so the more that we could focus on conversion and retention, the more effectively they could compete and become more and more of a market leader in that space.
Cool. Yeah, I do have a question actually.
Yeah,
I see you speak a lot lately on AI. I think it's one of the favorite topics of yours. And we see people here, whenever we bring AI to the podcast goes bazonkas in views. And whenever I record a video talking about AI isn't the hype. Yeah. And it's just not the hype, the reality is here. But usually when I talk to people, marketeers and growth people who are using AI, they use it very simply. They like, I talk to ChatGPT, I use Claude to analyze data. But what are the best ways you see people using AI that are like more out of the book? Or how do you see how we can use AI for growth?
Yeah, to me, I think the AI, if marketers are kind of doing the same work they were doing a year or two ago, and they haven't really changed their workflows, they're not using AI enough. Yeah. I'm probably spending 25 to 30% of my time each week in even just ChatGPT.
Wow.
Every single thing that I'm doing way faster because of ChatGPT. And I think that's the thing that you can't expect that it's gonna change the fundamentals of how growth and marketing works, but it helps you be so much more efficient, get answers so much more quickly, analyze data quickly. Like I love to put surveys in there, natural language query surveys. When I'm doing presentations like the one that I'll be doing tomorrow, AI is my partner through every step of the presentation, whether it's I need a case study on this, and then it's giving me case studies, whether I'm uploading the PDF of my presentation and looking for errors and suggestions on changing the flow of the presentation. And so I will upload the presentation 5 or 6 times as I'm making updates to keep making revisions on it. It's like this partner that allows me to continue to push the envelope and make things better. And then obviously long-term, I think the data analysis side is going to be the biggest side of AI. And I actually spoke at a conference here in South America, but in Santiago with the head of AI at Google, was also a speaker at this conference. And he really opened my eyes to the power of beyond generative AI to the analytical side of AI and how much bigger that is going to be than the generative AI side in just helping us process so much more data. And I think even in the personalization and targeting and all of these things will be enhanced significantly, but it doesn't. The mistake is if you're not deeply rooted in the fundamentals of human psychology and the fundamentals of retention and all the other parts of growth that are really critical, AI is not going to help you. So you have to deeply understand the fundamentals, and then you can do a lot more with it. So I think today the advantage with AI goes to startups instead of more established companies, because established companies are a little bit nervous about putting their proprietary data into it. Mm-hmm. Where startups, they don't have a lot to lose. They don't have lawyers checking every single thing they're doing. Yeah. They're not worried about getting in trouble or losing their job. So now you have a startup team of 2 or 3 people with the productivity of a team of 20 or 30 people, because they can really lean into AI. And so I think there's already huge advantages with startups on the innovation side and some of the other pieces, and not having bureaucracy and these sorts of things. But now you 10x their productivity. That I think that you're going to see the balance of power shift even more to startups in the next few years.
I was reading an article the other day, which is called the SaaS Apocalypse, which is a guy. He said, "I'm not a coder. I don't know how to code, but I just started a software. I've coded a software." He was using a different AI that I don't remember the name, and I coded
probably something like Bolt or Lovable or Cursor or something like that.
And then he said, "I just coded it on a software that I used to charge me $100 a month, and I'm not a coder. I don't know what I'm doing. I just spent 1 hour debugging it." And then he said, "In 10 years, this is going to be crazy. You're just going to give an order to the AI, and it's going to just create the SaaS you need." Do you think that's going to be a problem for a lot of like the micro SaaS, small companies, the SaaS that don't have a lot of technology? Or do you think like they are going to use AI as well, and then they're going to be on? What is your idea on it?
I think everything's just going to evolve a lot quicker. So I think it'll be a problem for a stagnant company, a company that is not feeling the pressure to evolve their product quickly. But as long as they're being faster in their response to changing customer needs, then I think they're going to be fine. And so the only people that are going to really suffer from AI are those that aren't really good at using it.
Yeah, I was seeing an example today. The guy was talking like that when we had like agriculture, I guess. Agriculture, yeah, right? Agriculture. We had people doing things by hand, and then now we have machines and everything. But there is
John Deere.
there is so much you can scale inside agriculture. So if you buy like 1 kilo of rice, you're going to use 1 kilo of rice.
Yeah.
But if you have a machine that produces like 100 kilos of rice for one person, it's not useful for him. But it's different in the software industry because the difficulty we have to build softwares right now, it's so high without AI. You need developers, you need a full team. And as much as we use AI to make it better, to make it faster, I think we don't know what is the ceiling for building things with softwares. So if it's going to be easier for you to build a SaaS for yourself or something like that, probably is just going to make the world better, nonetheless, And maybe these developers, they are going to be using these type of tools to make it easier for them to build things faster. And so I really think that your use case of entering ChatGPT, for example, and using it as a copilot, it's probably going to be the same applied for the software development.
I think, it already is, but it's kind of like where pair programming in the past was a popular way to do programming. Now you're pairing with AI.
That's it.
And what I find
Very smart assistant.
Yeah.
from a writing perspective,
Oh, it's crazy.
I no longer ever get writer's block. What should I write about? It's just like anytime I'm blocked, I just say, what should I write about? All the every question, and then
give me 100 ideas, if you need to.
Yeah, there's no stop. In fact, when I want to research a topic, I don't even research the topic anymore. I don't try to find a good article from an expert. I tell AI to write an article on the topic as Sean Ellis. And
nice.
What would Sean Ellis think about this? What would he write about this? And then it cranks it back. And then I listen to that article to educate myself.
How right is? I'm curious to know, like, when Sean Ellis is looking at AI Sean Ellis, how right does it get? Like, how close to the real thing?
So that's how I teach myself. So it basically says it in the language of things that I don't know how right that is because I'm teaching myself. But another similar way I use it is someone will send me a question and I'm really busy and don't have time to answer them. So then I'll plug it into ChatGPT. How would Sean Ellis answer this question?
Okay.
Then it cranks out the answer. And usually it's about 90% right.
Oh,
damn.
And so in about 5 minutes, I can do some quick editing and
make it 100%.
They think I spent 30 minutes preparing an answer for them.
That's cool.
But just so that again, it just makes me that much more efficient.
Damn, that's very, very cool. But just to keep in the AI topic, have you seen the features of reasoning and deep research that ChatGPT or other tools has?
No, I have.
Damn, that's going to be awesome
Deep
for
research,
you, I guess.
Yeah, deep research is crazy.
Yeah, I was building the topics here and some questions, and I asked Perplexity, which is a tool that has the deep research feature, and I asked it to run a full review of what is the ROI Hunters podcast, and it was like very, 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 very precise on everything that we do. It literally listened for a lot of our episodes, and then it gave a complete review of the average script that we are using in the episodes.
Oh my God.
And I sent you the later. You can see it.
I'll check it.
And it's awesome. So everything that you need to learn today, you can use the deep research feature. So it gives you almost like a scientific article.
Yeah.
So you can understand the topic that you're researching about, and then you use other tools to make an article or anything that you need.
Yeah. So I think one of the things with me and my personal learning style, I have attention deficit disorder, ADHD. And so if someone's trying to teach me something, I have about 30 seconds of attention before I just like, I'm not
I don't care
listening
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I always just say, I know you want to be able to just tell me a lot of things. Let me ask questions and give me quick answers. This is sort of always kind of like when someone's trying to teach me something, but that's what AI can do. Like AI will start cranking it out and I'll just be like, okay.
And you can talk to it.
Yeah, I heard enough. Go deeper on this. I heard it, just like it so taps into my own learning style.
That's cool.
And then I think another thing, like one of the things that I think has been almost a superpower in growth, and not just for me, but for anyone who's good at growth, is having like deep curiosity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so whether it's like, oh, I got to check the data, what happened? Oh, I got to run a survey. So for me, what helps me push the envelope with AI and ChatGPT is not like, I can't learn something by reading a manual of all the things it could do. I have to just be curious. I wonder if it could do this. And I'll pop up in the middle of the night and be like, I'm going to try it. Like I just, that curiosity of what it'll come back with. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, but like, almost all of my use cases are not because I heard someone else tell me it does that. It's, I wonder if it does that. I wonder how the quality would be. Dang, that's pretty good. And even like I was mentioning, I will upload a PDF of my slides and keep asking for feedback as they evolve. I then, as I was doing that, I build the slides in a product called beautiful.ai. And I copied the share link to the slides and I just, asked ChatGPT, are you able to read this? Or do I need to keep converting everything into a PowerPoint that's readable, then exporting it to PDF and then uploading it, which is kind of a little bit mundane, where if I could just share the latest version with a URL, it would be much more efficient. Yep. And so, but ChatGPT says, no, I'm not able to read that. So, but it's like, it's just very cool that even, you can just converse with it like it's, are you able to do this? And probably one of the coolest use cases I've had is I was going to a business function and it was with a bunch of CEOs of pretty good companies. And it's a really like casual business function though. And a lot of times the conversations get into, well, what are you working on? And what do you want to do long-term? And I've been too busy to even kind of like figure out sort of what I want to do long term. And
I'm already doing.
Yeah, kind of like my planning, my what I'm gonna do this year, what am I doing 3 years, what am I doing 5 years? And so I had about 20 minutes before this event where I arrived, and it's like beautiful place along the ocean, a nice day. So I just took a nice long walk down a path, not even a long walk, 20-minute walk of just the talking with ChatGPT, where I essentially documented out my 5-year plan of just like, how much should I balance on health and family and career and
traveling.
Traveling, and just essentially, the fact that I could work with ChatGPT and in 20 minutes plan out the next 5 years of my life. And does that mean it's like a perfect plan? No, but I definitely had my talking points. And then the next day sat down, took the text, dropped it into a Google Doc, moved some things around, fixed it, and continue to evolve it over time. But it's like, the fact that it can even help you figure out what you want to do in life is pretty cool.
I think it's the same use case that you have when you're coming here to the flagship.
Yeah, because what I do is I just put the ChatGPT voice, and then I talk
it takes like an hour.
I took an hour to come here, and then I just, like, if I want to prepare a presentation, I just say, I have a presentation on this. Just give me all you have about the topic. And then it starts out, that's cool. Use that, don't use that. And then give me a topic again. And then I just prepare the presentation. When I get here, it's already done. I just need to like put it on a different format.
Yeah. So one more thing real fast.
Okay, cool.
So I'm not sure if you know intro.co.
No.
Heard of that?
So, of course. That you pay like $1,000 to book something with them.
People will book like 15 minutes or 30 minutes with me.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know you're there.
Yeah, I'm on there. And so I always want to prepare for the call. I don't want to just go into each call. Yeah. And so I think I've gotten maybe 20 reviews at this point on there from my calls, and they're all 5 stars. And I think the main reason they're 5 stars is that people don't expect me to do so much preparation before the call. But I, again, kind of take the same approach where if I sat down and did a bunch of research and wrote things out, then it would probably be harder to, particularly like it might be a 15-minute call when someone's got this like really sticky business challenge. Like someone said to me recently that the Sean Ellis test, the product market fit survey that I have, they had a really high product market fit score, but they also had a high churn rate. So why do they have this? And so then I basically used that conversation while I was cooking my lunch. And so that's, I spend I spend as much time as each call, but I'm not sitting at my computer. I'm, whether I'm
You're doing something
cleaning up or cooking lunch, whatever it is. And then, so I just go into it with my mind already spinning on that topic. And so, it definitely, that chat just, I mean, a lot of it, if you only have 15 minutes to help figure out a company's problems, you definitely don't want to hit it cold. You gotta hit it with some momentum. So sometimes it'll even be, who are the 3 market leaders in this space? How are they differentiated? How does this company compare to those 3? Like just like whether it's research or their problem, but that's,
agree.
I think that being the founder of growth hacking, I think you really need to check out these tools for coding, like bolt.new or Lovable or any one of those, because considering the hacking in the term growth hacking, it's becoming very much easier to like build landing pages and maybe building
test very fast, right?
To test it very fast, and also to create like little tools. Some businesses, like before we are providing digital marketing and sales services. We have a lot of ideas, a lot of tools that earlier you would need to hire a developer for that, but now you can literally say it. What do you want? So I want a tool that receives a spreadsheet and take the spreadsheet and create some dashboards like this and that. And then you can create games, you can create surveys, you can do basically anything with normal language and test it out and maybe make your company grow more with these type of tools.
Awesome.
So
and test more hypotheses, right? I do have one question for you, which is it's a question I wanted to make to you a long time ago. I just remember it now. So if you were to prepare a growth hacker for a company, imagine you can like train someone from 0 to growth hacker. What are the abilities you think this person should have? Would you train them on? Like, I really wanted to understand what do you think constitutes of a growth hacker? You talk about curiosity, but what else?
Yeah, I mean, so it kind of depends. One, is it like a brand new startup where it's literally the growth hacker will be the only person doing this?
Is the CEO, right?
Yeah. Or is it a bigger company where ultimately they need to build and lead a team and navigate some of the cross-functional challenges? So the skill set for the latter, if they're going into a kind of a more established existing company, my opinion has changed over time. I used to think much more in terms of like, okay, what's the balance of creativity and analytical skills? But what I actually see, most of the big companies, or not even big company, even if it's a company of 20 or 30 people, they fail with growth because of the cross-functional challenges.
You mean like the technical part and
marketing doesn't want to work with product, doesn't want to work with sales, doesn't want to work with engineering, design, that they become more and more isolated from each other as they, just silos are a natural part of getting bigger. And so in that case, the growth leader, even if they know how to do everything, if the head of product is blocking them or the head of engineering says, you're not putting that code on our site, then you're not going to be able to do anything. And so that's where now I find that from a growth leader trying to get a company to go in that direction, you need to have essentially a good balance of diplomatic skills so that you're not angering everybody. But also you need to be pretty aggressive too, because if you're so diplomatic, like, oh, okay, I won't do that. You just keep backing off. You're not going to be able to drive real change. So you got to be able to push hard enough to say, this is the big opportunity in the company, and I want to run experiments here, and I got to get the people who control that area of the business to be on board and to at least let me do it. And even better, you're going to be more effective if they partner with you and want to work with you on it.
Cool. Ó, e fazendo um parêntese aqui, você que é dono de agência, eu tenho uma mensagem especial para você. Tem um movimento que já transformou mais de 800 agências em verdadeiras especialistas em food marketing. É por isso que eu vim anunciar a nova parceria do ROI Hunters, que é a Cardápio Web. A Cardápio Web é um ecossistema completo que está dando mais ROI para os restaurantes. É um CRM que integra automação de WhatsApp, cardápio digital e gestão completa. E eles criaram um programa de parcerias que é praticamente um acelerador de agências. Você recebe mentoria exclusiva, comissão, networking em eventos do setor e um acompanhamento personalizado para dominar o mercado de food service. Se você tem uma agência e quer faturar mais com food service ou você quer melhorar o seu serviço no geral, eu vou deixar um link aqui embaixo na descrição do vídeo, exclusivo para ouvintes do ROI Hunters entrarem no programa de parcerias. Aproveita que não vai durar muito tempo. So you talked about like the different stages, but whenever we try to hire people from growth or train someone for growth, we always talk about like, and I see that a lot of the growth school, they talk about a lot of the growth loops to understand a lot of cases and stuff like that. You have like a repertoire. I don't know how to say repertório. Like you have a repertoire of good cases and everything like that. But usually the people that I see that really goes the extra mile are the very analytical data and I don't even know, like the scientific method kind of mind.
Yeah.
You agree with that? How do you see that?
I do. And I think it boils down to they have to be able to, especially in a smaller company, they have to be able to like maximize the use of resources.
Yeah. If
you're focused on the wrong area of the business, you're going to waste a lot of resources. So they have to be really good. And this is where the analytical side comes in. They need to be very good about asking the right questions to spot the right opportunity to focus the energy. And so, sometimes it's going to be around customer acquisition and how do I figure out really effective places to reach my potential customers. Sometimes it's going to be around activation and onboarding. Sometimes it'll be around, retention or even monetization. And to be able to figure out what is the main opportunity I should be focused on right now, and then how do I ask the right questions about that opportunity to truly understand what's going on, and then ultimately, I think a lot of times when people think about marketing and creativity, they think about kind of clever branding and maybe something that's memorable or cute or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I think the real creativity here that is needed is the ability to solve problems, diagnose, understand problems, dig deeper to deeply understand the problems, and then come up with really good solutions that solve those problems. And I think that's the big skill set.
That's funny that you, just to make a comment.
Yeah.
The last time you were in this podcast, you asked a question for Danner. Danner was talking about how he was researching why people left V4. And then you said, you shouldn't be just researching that. You should be researching people who love you and create more products for these people. And then it changed V4 forever because of that. And I do have one question for you, which is on the education space. A lot of the companies suffer because they don't have LTV, right? People buy a course, they do the course, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And then even Masterclass and all these other startups try to solve that, but they have a long churn.
Yeah.
So nobody did a good job on it, on my opinion. Maybe Duolingo because now they're profitable, but it took like 10 years and a lot of cash. Do you see in any education space, any company that is doing like an amazing job on LTV, cohort retention, or anything like that? Do you have any case? I'm trying to search myself on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I think that the part of the challenge in the education space is that everybody wants to be in it.
Yeah.
And so if you want to learn something, there's so many ways to learn it. And we were just talking about like
ChatGPT.
I could just use ChatGPT and just like keep asking questions. I can use ChatGPT for, even like Google Translate will give me certain answers, but it's not going to be necessarily the colloquial answers where I ask ChatGPT how to say something and it'll say, here's the proper way, but here's the way Brazilians say it. And so like, there's just so much more nuance to it. And so that's basically $20 a month for the premium, or free. You can do a lot there. And so I think, so that makes the acquisition side hard. And then ultimately, when the acquisition side is hard, the advantage goes to the company that does have the best retention and monetization and cross-selling. And so, but notoriously in the education space, people want to learn, but they're not willing to put the work in to learn. And so they lose, or maybe they want to put the work in to learn, and then they get busy with something else. And so, retention and engagement is really hard, whether it's in class education or online education. And that's why I think Duolingo has done so well. One, the freemium model is a great model. And so I'm sure that most of their acquisition is word of mouth acquisition, which then means you don't have to have a really high LTV if you acquire people essentially for free. And then they break that education down into such small pieces that, like, I do some lessons where I'll literally spend 2 minutes in a day learning. Sometimes I can get through it really fast. And so, and then they're trying to engage me to do another lesson. And for me, I'm more focused on just the vanity of my streak. I got to do my lesson today. Let's save some energy, so I do my lesson tomorrow instead of doing 10 today. But if I truly want to learn a language, some languages where I have a pretty good background, like I lived in Hungary for 7 years. So then when I was going back there, I wanted to refresh because I don't have a lot of opportunities to practice Hungarian. So then maybe I was doing 4 or 5 lessons a day. So it kind of depends on what I'm trying to accomplish there. But I do think the gamification and making it fun and doing it in those little bite sizes is great for that. You're probably not going to learn growth very well that way.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I mentioned that the original head of growth for Duolingo is Brazilian, Gina Gottlieb, and she's now working with some former Duolingo colleagues of hers to take the same learning style from Duolingo and put it into other categories of learning. So they've raised some pretty good funding with it. They haven't really announced exactly what they're doing, but I do think the lessons will be somewhat transferable to other areas. But yeah, education is notoriously challenging. Just to reiterate, really hard to acquire because everybody wants to get into education. And then really
a lot of people give it for free as a CAC strategy. Like if you have a software, you're going to teach the software for free because you want people to use it. And then HubSpot gives for free these courses because they want people. So it's very hard on it. And on the LTV, people just want to grab the education and use it. They don't want to pay you forever. So that's a problem as well. So my idea, my thesis is that education is going to become just acquisition method for a lot of companies. Companies are going to do education for free or very cheap or just to pay the CAC for them. For people to use the real service,
and you've seen that in the marketing tool space for a long time. That's the main one. Yeah, that and whether they call it education or they just call it content marketing. Yeah, but it's content marketing. The idea is to introduce them to some learning that's going to make them realize they need the tool that this company has built, and it's probably the most common way that marketing tools businesses have marketed themselves for a long time is through content marketing, essentially
inbound, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
If they can educate people on why they might need that tool or create that context in which that tool.
So do you agree with my thesis?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So just going back to the other question, you're talking about the conflicts that we have between areas of the company. So sales with marketing and such. Who do you think has to be the vector for growth hacking inside the company? Because sometimes people are here listening the podcast and they are not necessarily the CEO or the CMO or someone with a high level, but they listen here, they understand these strategies, and they want to apply inside the company, but how can I do that?
Yeah.
And maybe what are the things that you saw in other companies that can help them with it?
So pretty much, I would say the failure rate for an individual to be able to do it has to be 90-95%.
Okay.
They try, and part of it, again, it's just really hard to become cross-functional, one function at a time. So they can't just like, I'm a marketer, I'm going to go convince the product team. I got to convince the product team and the engineers and this all at the same time. And I can convince them, but if the results don't quickly come, then lack of results will unconvince them.
Yeah.
And so that's been something I've been focused on a lot for probably the last 5 years. Essentially, since my book came out, we've reached about 800,000 copies sold.
Mm-hmm.
And many times I've had CEOs even who are like, I read the book and I got so excited, but it just didn't stick in my company. And so I originally, interestingly, it's another Brazilian who helped me co-develop this, but the guy who was running growth for Office 365, so
Okay.
Microsoft Office 365, Microsoft was the first company that bought a lot of our books, like thousands of our books.
Mhm.
And so he quickly said, we can't do this. We're having troubles with this. So he had recommended to me to create a workshop to work with them. And then he essentially co-developed the original version of the workshop with me. And I think the benefit of a workshop is you get all the key stakeholders in the room for a day and can have some kind of program where they all get on the same page. So it's almost like you can't gradually do that. Like I had tried consulting before and I couldn't really do it. So you almost have to, like, I think a good analogy is like the defibrillator that when someone has a heart attack, you're like shock them into this new way of doing things. And so I've refined that workshop approach now I just did it last week in Mexico City for a company, but I've refined it. I always run a survey afterwards, get feedback of what worked, what didn't work, make changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been set. I think the first one I did was 2018. And so since then I've done a lot of them. It's not perfect, but I think the success rate goes up a lot with a workshop type format where you get the key stakeholders in the room together. And I don't even talk about experimentation until the second half of the day. First half of the day.
Is it like one day?
It's a one day.
Okay.
Yeah. And the first half of the day, I'm basically talking about just trying to get the teams to agree how growth works in the business today.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. How do you convince them about growth? Like, use data, do you use cases? How do you convince them?
I mean, I give them some of the theory, but I also have them convince each other. So what I'll do is I'll have all of them collaboratively design their growth engine, not what it should be, but actually what it is today. So when all the teams are together saying, okay, this is how we acquire customers, this is how we activate them, this is how we continue to drive engagement. If we have cross-sell, this is what the cross-sell and the monetization, and here's how we drive referral today. And then even before that, I'm getting them to agree on what is the value metric, so the North Star metric. And so once you have them all aligned, and it's debate and it's strong disagreements, but once you have them all aligned, then you can start to say, okay, within that overall model, what is the one area that if we focus all of our creative energy to drive improvement, that would move the North Star metric the most? And again, more debate, but usually they hone in on either activation, maybe referral, maybe monetization, but every business is going to be different. And then now they're all agreeing, this is the opportunity as a company we need to tackle in the short term. And now they can start to do creative brainstorming around experiments they could run in that area. And now we start to talk about the importance of experimentation but I don't talk about experimentation until they all see the business through the same lens. And that's one of the big problems. If they, there's a parable that I'm sure you guys have, some of the listeners will have seen, and maybe you guys have seen, the blind men and the elephant. Have you heard of this?
No,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's
if you
a cool
had
story.
like 3 or 4 blind people next to an elephant, depending on where they are with the elephant, if they're on the side of the elephant, they're going to describe the elephant as a wall because, it's just a bit, if they're on the back, they might describe it as a rope because they're near the tail. If they're on the front, they might describe it as a spear because they're near a tusk. And so they can't really understand the elephant until they all communicate with each other.
That's actually cool analogy.
Yeah. And so once they all communicate with each other, then they have a picture of the elephant. It's the same thing with the growth engine, that the marketer perspective of the growth engine is incomplete. The products person perspective of the growth engine is incomplete. And it's not until you get them all discussing and sharing their perspectives that you get like a rich model of how growth actually works in the company.
That's cool.
And so I kind of stumbled in that in probably 20 years ago when I was at a company called Log Me In. It was supposed to be a short meeting. I was vice president of marketing, a meeting with the vice president of product. And it was, it's supposed to be just like a normal short meeting. But somehow we started whiteboarding. How does growth really work? We were one of the first freemium businesses. And so, having that free word of mouth was a really important loop. And so once we started to document his perspective plus my perspective, that 20-minute meeting turned into a 2-hour meeting and a crazy whiteboard. And
it's cool.
Both of us worked together much better after that because we had the shared understanding of how the business grew. And so now I'm trying to get all the functions together to essentially replicate that exercise.
And why do you think that the consulting method is not necessarily going to work better than the workshop method?
Because I used to try the consulting method, and what I found was, again, I'm trying to go each function at a time.
Okay.
And in the beginning, I have about 2 weeks where they say, "Oh, this is Sean Ellis. Like, yeah, he's the guy who invented the term growth hacking." They're all excited, but habits are really hard to change. And so, inertia kicks in and they fall back to their old way of doing things. And it just, but what I found was I was ineffective. I would go in and early the senior people would be in these growth meetings but over time, the meetings might go too long, whatever it might be. And then the senior people start sending their junior people, and then the junior people don't really have the pull, and results kind of stall out, and it just wasn't really working. And so now I there's no way I would ever do consulting unless I first started with the workshop. If I started with a workshop and it built the momentum going in the right direction, then I can do the consulting and tweak. And usually today, I don't personally do the consulting because I don't have time to stay long-term with the company, but I'll train a team of consultants to do it. And then they have access to me if they run into some challenges. So I think the consulting will work, but one of the things I do now is I'll do interim VP growth roles like Bounce that I mentioned. And when I went into Bounce, that's in my contract. We're going to do this workshop type format within the first 2 weeks, because again, even if I'm full-time in the company, I know I'll fail if we can't get the functional teams working together well.
Got it.
Quase todo empresário com quem eu troco ideia, seja amigo ou convidado aqui do ROI Hunters, sempre me fala que contratar uma agência de marketing para a empresa deles foi a mesma coisa que jogar dinheiro no lixo. Você que está me ouvindo, é empresário, tem uma empresa que já faz mais de 100 mil reais de faturamento todo mês, me diz se isso já aconteceu com você. Você contratou uma agência de marketing para te ajudar a vender, mas só ganhou prejuízo e dor de cabeça. Agora, se você pudesse testar o serviço dessa agência antes mesmo de ter um contrato mensal e ainda pudesse pedir todo o seu dinheiro de volta se na segunda semana de serviço não estiver satisfeito. É isso que a gente oferece aqui na estruturação estratégica. Em apenas 4 semanas, a V4 vai estruturar todo o marketing comercial da sua empresa, resolvendo os seus problemas mais críticos que estão te fazendo jogar dinheiro no lixo. E se na segunda semana você não estiver satisfeito com o andamento do serviço, todo o investimento vai ser devolvido. Vale lembrar que nós já atendemos mais de 20 mil projetos, desde empresas gigantes como iFood, XP e Cicobi, até empresas pequenas. Ou seja, você está comprando conhecimento, experiência e principalmente segurança. Se quiser começar 2025 muito à frente da concorrência, essa é a hora. Toca aqui embaixo para conhecer essa proposta de perto.
Do you mentor people? Do you like do mentorships and stuff like that?
Not really. I mean, like some people have kind of used that intro.co stuff
many times.
Not even for $1
What
million.
do you-
No, just kidding.
No, but actually, now I became curious. What do you think about the business model of intro.co? Because Denner wanted to put like an intro.co inside Stage, which is my company.
Yeah.
Because I think people would pay like $500, 500 reais to book a call with 1 hour of Guilherme and something like that. Do you think it seems to me that it doesn't have a lot of traction and it shouldn't have, but what do you think of the business model?
So I think that a lot of companies have tried the model and it hasn't worked very well for, I mean, it kind of works for some companies, but I think intro.co, one, they raised a pretty good amount of money out of the gate. The founder sold a previous business to Intuit. So he's a pretty proven founder, and they have a waiting list on the talent side of, last I heard, about 30,000 people who wanted to offer their services, but they're very selective on who they allow in.
Yeah.
And then I think that their monetization model is really smart. So what in the past, because I worked with some of the ones in the past, and they always had like a 30% cut that they would take. What intro.co does, so for anyone listening, if they want to book time with me, go to intro.co/Sean Ellis, because then I get 90% of the money. But if they go to intro.co and you navigate the marketplace, I only get 30%.
Damn.
I mean, sorry, no, I only get 70%. So they take 30%.
That's cool to know.
And
that's very cool to know.
But the last piece is, if they market me, like if you search Google for Sean Ellis and then you see the intro.co ad and you click on that, I only get 50%.
Okay.
So they have 3 different
Very
tiers. Nice. And so essentially their marketing kind of gets funded by the talent by doing it.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
because you receive the most amount of money when you give them customers for free.
And they're just selling your hours.
Yeah.
So they don't have any cost.
Yeah. So I have a really big incentive to really promote the heck out of them, but promote the heck out of my profile.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea, like the size of the company, like number of employees or something like that?
It's relatively small.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
Yeah, I think it's sub 10.
Sub 10? So yeah, I can imagine the revenue based on that, but it's cool to know.
But I think they can run it in a really lean way.
They don't need to have a lot of people because the talent is outside the company.
Yeah,
right?
but they have some really big names associated with it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So they're basically they're basically like, when you're seeing their Instagram ads or their Facebook ads, it's often a billionaire who you have access to, and so
you need to have those flagship people.
Yeah, they're really closely associating their brand with that person, and that person may be charging $10,000 an hour, and that's not off, very far from the reality of some of the top talent that's on there.
Actually, in Brazil, I don't know if that's just a Brazilian phenomenon. It's becoming crazy. How can one person charge? So just to give an example, Negro charged 1 million reais, which is $200,000. No, a little bit less now. Yeah, but you get the idea. To have a lunch with him and some of his friends, like Flavio Augusto, Dennett, and a lot of people volunteer to pay for it.
Yeah,
because we have a very
It's not
influencer.
It's not even a mentorship. It's
no,
like
it's a lunch. It's a lunch.
Just hanging out.
Yeah. And it's we have a very strong influencer, deity, worshiping culture here in Brazil. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it's getting out of hand. They're like, people pay a lot of money just to meet and greet a lot of famous people.
Like we have clubs that someone have. It's like 200,000 reais.
Yeah,
at least.
No, it's $100,000 now.
$100,000.
Yes. Flavio? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and they have like 200 members.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. And so I think the difference with intro.co, like there's definitely some people like, I'll get on the phone and they're like, oh, I'm just so stoked I'm talking with Sean Ellis, and like they're
on the screen.
Yeah, they're less focused on like what is what their objective is, but I think what they find is that I'm very quickly like, hey, great, yeah, it's nice to speak with you too, but let's jump into your problem.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I think, for some of them, like in particular, if they're in a startup and I can point them in the right direction,
That's very cool.
the ROI for them can be,
It's crazy.
can be
No.
huge.
That usually when I don't do a lot of consulting or stuff like that. But when I do, I see the ROI very clearly, because usually when people are desperate enough to pay me money to give a shot on their company, it's usually because I understand I only do know the education part, and it's very, very easy to see like the ROI. I do believe in buying knowledge is the most ROI you can get. So Intro is very cool on that.
And most of my best blog posts of recent months were started with intro.co calls.
Yeah, you get idea
There's
from
so
the
many
intro.
like challenges that are intro.
Yeah.
Like I had a head of a movie studio want to know how they could use the product market fit question, because I think they listened to me on Lenny's podcast. And I specifically said, this doesn't really work for a movie, because how would you feel if you could no longer watch that movie again? Doesn't really apply. And so then he's like, well, so then is there a way we can tweak this question? And it became, like, so when it's something like that, if it's an interesting enough challenge, I might spend 3 times the amount of the call just digging in, because it's like, wonder what the heck I would tell them to do in that case.
How sad would you be if you forgot this movie?
Yeah,
that could be one of the
or
questions.
even I think what we had talked about is if they're like testing the movie, the whole idea of the question is you want to figure out if you should focus on scaling or not, or if the product's not ready to scale. So in the early testing of the movie, partway through, how would you feel if you can't watch the end of this movie?
Oh, damn. That's great. That's great. Yeah, like a paywall. Almost like a
I have one question for you that I always do. The last podcast I did as well, but the people here didn't see it. I think it's very important. How can I know that I have product market fit? Because that's the question I get the most, and that's the hardest one, because there are some people who like, they are on e-commerce and it's very different from when you are in a SaaS, and it's very different if you have a physical store, and it's very different if you have an education company. What is the rule of thumb?
How can I be sure? Like, I'm sure it's not a question anymore.
Just so to make an addendum to it, I don't remember which book I was reading. I think it's the Great CEO Within. The guy said, you don't have to question product market fit. If you have it, you know it. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the most useless.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, because the thing is that, like, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you go on a manic journey where one day you're feeling really positive, and whatever information you look at, you're like, oh, we're going to take over the world.
I'm a genius.
Yeah. And then the next day you look at the exact same information and you're like,
oh my God, I'm going
shit.
What the hell are we doing? We're completely wasting our time. And so I think the more that you can, have standardized metrics that break you out of the emotional roller coaster, the better. And one of the coolest stories with that question that you just asked is actually Nubank here in Brazil.
Oh,
and it used to be about 5 years ago when I would present to big groups of executives, there would be a bank in the audience, somebody from a bank in the audience who'd say, like, this doesn't apply to us. Like, we're in a highly regulated industry. We can't do experimentation. That's like, why are you wasting my time? Kind of reading between the lines, where Nubank essentially says that they're one of the most kind of fanatical followers of my methodology of any company in the world. That's what their chief product officer, Jag, said on Lenny's podcast. And what he essentially describes their growth model, they're about a $70 billion company now.
Yeah.
Most of their growth has been organic through just really happy word of mouth
referral.
Every single product they launch, they run they call it the Sean Ellis test. I never called it that. I was just called the product market fit test. But they run that, and they want at least 50% of those early users to say they would be very disappointed if they could no longer use that product before they try to scale it. And so, starting in credit cards, essentially every new product they launch, they're using that question to hone the offering. and then it becomes the cross sell, the cross sell, the cross sell increases that lifetime value on the customer. So I think that question is really powerful. But again, I told you there was the intro.co call that
The movie guy.
Yeah, no, a different one where the guy said, I have a really high score on the Sean Ellis test, but my churn rate is high. So from a retention perspective, it doesn't look like we have product market fit. So do I have it or do I not have it? And so through that phone call, and I wrote a blog post on this, following the call because it was really fascinating. He was essentially basing churn off of a sign up.
Oh, so the guy was not activated yet.
Yeah, and then he's running the survey to active users.
Oh,
and so I just told him
when you say active users, it's the paying ones, right?
Whether it's the paying ones, I don't remember what.
Yeah, the activated ones, at least.
But essentially, it was people who had received, who had actually experienced the product.
Got it.
He had engagement problem,
Yeah, and he's saying I have a churn problem, but he's including all the people who never experienced the product, and they had actually like a tough onboarding. I don't actually remember the category of the business now, but so I can't look at churn from a sign. It's like saying, hey, people who saw my ad never used again. Well, they never used it in the first place. So at what point do you include them in a retention cohort? It should not be until they've actually reached the activation moment.
But when you were thinking about this problem, did you think about any solution for if they had the problem, if they had the high percentage of the product market fit question and also had a bad retention?
If that were the case, I would say the retention is the more important. Yeah, actions speak louder than words. But I don't think I've ever come up against that issue. I think, again, you're asking, how would you feel if you couldn't use this product? And people are saying, I would be very disappointed. So the likelihood of them churning, if they say they'd be very disappointed without the product, is pretty low.
Do you have a correlation with churn rate and the percentage of people that respond that they would be very disappointed?
Yeah, they're highly correlated.
Yeah.
Anytime I've done that.
Yeah, like if I have like 50% on the first one, I am going to probably have somewhere around that of churn.
It may not be percentage wise, but it's less about what your actual churn rate is. It's what you want to do is look at retention cohorts.
Okay, got it.
And make sure that you have long-term retention of some percentage of each group that signs up.
Okay.
And so if ultimately every group that signs up churns out, then you don't have product market fit.
Okay, yeah.
So what you want to do is, whether it's at 5% long-term retention, that's fine.
Okay.
That's, companies like Calm, the meditation app, that's where they are. They're at 5%, but a company like Instagram is 50% long-term retention.
After 12 months in before, we have around 30%, I guess, 20 or 25 or 30%.
And that's great. And so whatever percent you have, if you can bump it up to, like, if we are at 30 and you can do 35%, that's gonna increase your.
Got it.
The thing is, I've read not long ago in a book, people saying that the guy did research and said, like, usually brands that grow should be very good on acquisition, because retention, once you get to a level, you're going to spend so much money to change it, because there is a misconception that retention to retain a client is 5 times cheaper than acquire a new one. And he said that's BS. It's not true. You're going to spend as much money to retain someone that it is to acquire.
I completely disagree.
Yeah, I want to hear your
biggest
opinion.
lever for retention is activation.
Activation.
Yeah, you actually, tactically driving retention is pretty tough. Like there's not like you can run retention campaigns and that's going to make a difference. The best indicator of long-term retention is a great first experience with the product.
That's true.
Okay.
Once you get them to a great first experience, they still might churn if it's a low frequency use case, like say Airbnb or something in the travel space. So then your next goal after activation is to get them to build a habit with the product. And that's where something like Muriel's Hooked model can be really good. So if you guys read the book Hooked,
No.
No.
it's
Okay.
it's a really
Just
simple. I think the audiobook's maybe like a 3-hour listen.
Okay, cool.
But the whole idea is that people come back and use a product afterwards because of a trigger that brings them back. So you have something that makes you think of it, and maybe the trigger
Like
is
when I sit at a restaurant, I order a Coke because the trigger is sitting on the restaurant, for
it could
example.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
Or when you were at the street and waiting for a car or something like that, you think about Uber, you know?
Yeah, or you're waiting and I got a couple minutes to kill. Maybe even bring up Instagram. So like,
Yeah.
that
Or
becomes like,
Duolingo, I don't know.
yeah. So that trigger in that case is he would call it an internal trigger,
Mhm.
but you can also have an external trigger, which is a notification pops up.
Yeah.
Someone
Or the
someone
outdoors.
just tagged you in a photo on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm checking that photo.
Better
Yeah.
check, you know?
Better check.
was I doing something bad? Was I,
Yeah.
did I not look good? Whatever. it might
So you
be.
have to trigger the
Yeah, so you
user
have
to use
triggers
it.
that bring
Yeah.
you back, and then he essentially says, then you take an action on the trigger, then there's a variable reward, and then you want to take each engagement with a product to to end with an investment. So get them to actually put something that will make the product even more valuable the next time.
Yeah. The only thing I see is whenever I talk about it, people usually raise their hands and say, I have an ownership model. So people buy my product and they go home and they forget I sell brooms. Really, a guy yesterday just raised his hand. I sell brooms.
Yeah.
Do I use growth? And I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. It's like, should I just say, hey, just sell the broom,
but
man?
Even in that case, like, do you have complementary products that you could sell?
That's what I talk to
sell
him,
dust
like,
pans. Can you sell, vacuums later? Can you, like whatever it might be, and then
Usually people just they're very focused on the product, not on the company, and that's a problem. And then I just like, oh, but the guy just bought the light. There was a lighting guy, and then he said, I sell lights, and I said, how many people do you have in your base? 500 people. And I said, they're homeowners, and he said, yes. I said, you have 1,000 things to sell.
Yeah. And then I'll be sharing a case tomorrow at the conference of John Deere. And,
Oh, really?
yeah.
They're clients.
Yeah.
So like John Deere.
They're gonna be there.
Oh wow, very cool.
Yeah,
So
good.
John Deere actually has a North Star metric,
Yeah.
and they went from, before they had the North Star metric, very like transaction based, like I sold a tractor, great, and like
Mhm.
just make one sale. And then they decided, I don't know when they introduced it, but I think it's fairly recently, they introduced a North Star metric of acres managed.
Oh, that's actually very cool.
And after they introduced that, I'll share the results tomorrow, but after they introduced it, they ended up getting a lot of people on subscription type products that are part of the John Deere collection of products.
Nice.
And the people went from kind of being transaction focused more to lifetime value focused. And
Nice.
how do I keep helping those farmers manage more acres? And so
It's very nice.
that right metric can move people out of that. So I don't know if a tractor and a broom are the same
No, but it's cool.
thing, but
it's cool.
I think it just shows that that's a 188-year-old company.
Yeah.
If they can use, kind of change how they frame success around a metric, that ultimately ends up changing how people engage with the brand.
And it is the main thing, right? If you have the wrong metric, you're going to focus on the wrong thing. And I see a lot of people looking at the wrong metrics. Usually that's what it is.
I would like to ask about like reactivation, because everyone has some kind of churn.
Yeah.
And right now at V4, we are at that 30% level or something like that. So we have 70% of our clients from the cohort that they churn for some reason. Do you think, or have you seen any strategies to reactivate these clients? And is it good to focus on that, or is it better just to focus on retaining a little more and getting more clients?
I personally think of them as as just like a marketing group.
Okay.
And they're somewhat qualified. Obviously, you reach them,
They
you convert
bought
them.
before.
They're more qualified than someone who maybe has no need for the product.
Yeah.
But they're also people who had a bad enough experience with your product that stopped using it. So there's the
Yeah, or
advantage
they
is they're
hate
somewhat
you.
pre-qualified. The disadvantage is that there's a reason that they left. And so, but it's still just a marketing group. Like,
But have you seen it being used as a
Sure.
good strategy to?
I think that's like saying if you've seen marketing being used as a good
Okay,
strategy. So
yeah,
like, I think it's literally it gets back into the bucket of acquisition. It just
Okay.
becomes it's almost like a media property for acquiring users, but don't have expectations that you're going to acquire them at way higher rate than an untested campaign that's it's an owned media opportunity versus so it's somewhat free to market to them versus if you're on
Facebook
or Google, but you shouldn't expect a massively high conversion rate off of them because they already left. So it might be that they left because they never built the habit, and like we talked about with that hooked model. And that's a pretty good group then to reacquire if they never built the habit.
Yeah.
But it might be that they realized the product was not right for what their needs are, and that's going to make them really hard to acquire. So that becomes at that point, then you don't want to just look at them as a monolithic group. You want to start to segment that.
Yeah.
Like how active were they with the product? If they used once and never came back, maybe they weren't activated. If they used a lot and then stopped using, that they're probably harder to reacquire. And but it might be like if you're B2B, it might be that they went out of business, and in which case then it would be impossible to acquire them.
Yeah, I think that for service companies like before, I think it's a little bit harder for us to reactivate these clients because normally when they churn, I think that the main reason is that they didn't get their needs fulfilled. We had some kind
Or
of problem.
They have an expectation that wasn't fulfilled.
Yeah, maybe that. Sometimes they are going to be
I've talked to
trying
people who
something
said,
else.
Did you sell more? I said, yes, but not enough. Like we fulfilled the promise, but not in high quantity enough for them. Right?
Yeah, but I think that the main insight that I get here for Sean is that you can't look at this specific group and think that they are necessarily they are going to convert better than the acquisition, their new ones. Yeah, I think that's good enough.
Interestingly, when I was at Bounce, I mentioned the luggage storage network.
Yeah.
A big part of our newly acquired customers were actually reacquisitions.
Okay.
Because it's the travel space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in the travel space, it's so infrequent that
they actually never churned. They just didn't
the
travel.
way we acquired them the first time was they were searching Google for luggage storage Paris, and they used it once, and they don't even remember the name of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year later, they're searching luggage storage Rome, and then they click on our ad and we essentially pay to acquire them
twice.
Is that, did they churn the first time? Did they, so that's where we then started to say, like, how many times do we need to acquire them until we can lock them in?
Mm-hmm.
And then are there strategies where we can give them, so that they have additional credits? And then with those additional credits, the next time they don't want to forget about it because, don't I have some credits for that luggage storage? Which one was that? And so ultimately, until you can push them into the habit zone and you can acquire them long term. But Booking.com has the same thing. They, so many people don't go to a Booking.com to book their travel. They go to Google and find Booking.com. And then how many times does that have to happen before they start to plug in Booking.com?
Got it.
I have one last question for you. I've seen a thesis about, Adam Mosseri, the CEO of Instagram?
No.
Okay, so the thing is, his idea in Instagram is trying to force more personal brands than corporate brands.
Mm-hmm.
And what they said is people are becoming more fans of personal brands than corporate brands. Cristiano Ronaldo brand is bigger than Real Madrid in Instagram and a lot of places. Neymar just came back. Do you know Neymar?
Yeah.
Neymar came back to Brazil and now he's talking about buying the club that he's playing for. Okay. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
And then you have all over the place, Kylie Jenner and stuff like that. But a lot of people from Silicon Valley, I seen commenting on it, writing articles on it, saying, no, the product is key because people love the product that they have. Like, for example, Kylie Jenner can tell me to buy an energetic energy drink. If I don't love energy drink, I don't care.
Yeah.
So the product is key. If you have a product that people love using it and the user case is perfect, doesn't care the brand it is.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
So I had not heard that, but I think the CEO of Instagram is right on that. Like, nobody wants business content.
Yeah.
Like, I just think the likelihood that you want to follow to see what this company keeps cranking out is just like, that's just not very realistic. Where if you like, whether you aspire to be like a Kylie Jenner or you like the content that this type of person puts out there, an expert, you follow people, I think with a lot more passion than you follow businesses. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen with businesses, but I think it is much more likely to happen with people. And then the challenge becomes, are companies willing to let their people become the face of their company?
Yeah.
And, essentially make their brand secondary to the people. And that's hard. I remember, and things have evolved over time, but I remember when I first started blogging, my company telling me, we don't want you to write about the company, especially after I left, never mention us again. And funny enough, that when I actually published my book, the CEO of that company said to me, how come my name's not really in the book? I'm like, you guys told me
not to.
But this was 5 or 6, maybe even 10 years later. It makes sense that
which company was that?
I don't want to say that. but 5 or 6 or 10 years later, they had evolved to the point where they forgot they told me not to write about their company.
Okay, got it.
That it became so much more normal for employees within companies to write about it, which then adds brand credibility. So you see it with like an Amplitude, for example. They like to hire really smart people to write about analytics. So it's not, I'm not reading what Amplitude's writing about analytics. I'm writing what John Cutler wrote about. He's not there anymore, but in the past, I'm writing about what an expert who happens to work for that company, but then the company is writing off the brand of that individual.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about like employee generated content right now.
Yeah.
Right? The people from the company generate spontaneous content, and it converts, at least no, it doesn't convert. Gets 20 times more impressions than corporate content, and it makes sense. I don't want to share corporate content.
Medium-like content.
Yeah. And it's win-win. But I think companies also feel threatened when suddenly their employees' profile gets so big that other companies want to hire them away.
Yeah, they can start their own company.
Yeah, that when they leave, they now have this asset that was somewhat built on the company dying.
Yeah, or even controversies as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they write something that reflects badly on the company. There's a control issue there that I think is going to cause some companies to be less comfortable with it, but they're just not being realistic either.
Yeah, I think it's funny because it's going to be a major shift on companies. I think it's going to be as big as the last ones, but we're going to see like Fortune 500 people. Like, you're going to see those people become companies because they have a whole branding under them. I remember BTS changed the economy of Korea and stuff like that. I was like, oh my God. And okay, that was it. You have a last question?
I have one last question.
One last comment on that, though, is that like, it's really interesting when you see celebrities never used to do this, but now you see like a Ryan Reynolds or
Ryan Reynolds is a great case.
Yeah, like that. These people who have essentially built incredible companies off of their personal brand.
Yes.
And there's billionaires that are being created.
When the Rock Johnson became a billionaire selling tequila, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So and another thing that I see is the great CEOs of Silicon Valley also coming out of the closet. Like Mark Zuckerberg became a creator, and like Elon Musk, of course, is the main one. But I see a lot of the CEOs now posting content. I don't know if it's strategy or he just likes to use the content or something like that.
But also like coming on a lot more podcasts now, just realizing that their personal brands become fuel for growth for the businesses. And so Benioff, I know.
So it's good to pass this through you, so I have even further now.
Yeah, but Mark Benioff didn't used to do podcasts, and now I know he's actively seeking high profile podcasts because they realize that, you know, the personal brand of the CEO can really move the business forward.
That's so
And
cool.
I think, you know, the more and more that others within a business are able to do that's a really important wave to ride.
Nice.
I think that my last question is going to be for the when we think about the growth hackers that they are listening here, what would be one or two things that you think that they need to focus on learning or improving in the next 5 years?
Read my book. No, okay.
Well, I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways. So one, I think getting better and better at the analytics side, being able to ask the right questions and find the right answers and not have to outsource that to, you know, a data scientist, but empowering yourself to be data curious and dig into the data, I think is a huge competitive advantage.
Even easier with AI right now.
It becomes way easier with AI. And I think we're going to move much toward natural language queries instead of having to, you know, be able to
Code.
SQL.
Even if it's SQL queries or even Amplitude is way easier than a SQL query, but it still gets a little bit complicated how to do it. But when I think within the next couple of years, you're going to see Amplitude be entirely natural language query based. And so I think that would be the first thing. And then second, it was actually Tiago Negro was just asking me, so you're going to write another book? And I had said to him that if I were going to write another book, it would be on AI, but it would be crazy for me to write a book about AI in growth, because in 1 year I'll look how stupid I was. The stuff that I wrote about AI, like we can do so much better stuff now. And so it will be dated so quickly. But I just think people need to just be pushing themselves that whatever I'm doing, how can I use AI to do this better and more quickly and more efficiently? And so that would be the two things. So the curious piece, and then just continuing to push that envelope on how you're leveraging AI to be more effective in your job.
Yeah, even you are using like 30% of your time with AI. So
I have a feeling that that's going to just keep increasing until eventually it's a companion where 100% of my time is AI is assisting me in absolutely everything I do.
They're going to implant in your brain, so you don't have to use it. It's just going to be there.
Yeah, I
so
think
my
that's
brain's
hard.
already implanted in AI, so it'll be vice versa.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, cool. So if you like this episode, remember to give the like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, give 5-star rating and comment on YouTube to know if you like podcasts on English, if you want us to bring more international guests. And how do people find more about you if they haven't met you before, and if that's the first time they get to know about you? How do they keep
So
consuming?
Substack's a good place to follow my writing.
Okay.
So seanellis.substack.com.
Substack. I don't know what is that.
Substack is a newsletter. website.
Writing platform.
I have a Substack.
That's another great business model, but we'll save that for another time. But then I accept every invite I get on LinkedIn until someone tries to sell me something, and then I quickly unconnect. And then, if you want to have a conversation, check out intro.co/Sean Ellis.
That's so cool. So don't remember to follow us for the next episode. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.